discuss. We're waiting for you to come here. Not. Paula thought we might be finished. She was worried. But we're not. We're up to, on page 35, Strategic Regional Collaboration. Blair, do you want to walk us through this list briefly, and then we'll open it up to questions? Thanks.
I wonder, Chair, in the interests of time, is it easier for members to maybe just ask me questions on the relevant sections? Is that easier?
Absolutely. And so if we can save the speeches and just go for the questions. Martin, I think you had one, even though you're not.
I think it would be useful, and I'm happy to join Blair in this. If we talk about the Waikato Mayoral Forum, that's page
35, Gary.
Page 35, and I attended on your behalf. The Mayoral Forum actually, while it's closed to media and public, it is actually open to any elected member who wants to sit in and listen, as I understand it. Just very quickly, you'll be pleased to know that the mayors were delighted that we're carrying on as in our membership of the Waikato Plan. They were very pleased, felt that was very positive, and I was very delighted. I said a few senior members were somewhat diffident on it, and I acknowledge that. I just wonder, Blair, if you would pick up perhaps the issue of the Waikato regional funding item, and the fact that, and the role of the regional council, where that is at. And Gavin Irons, I think, on behalf of a group, wrote expressing deep regret on the fact that the regional council is not at this point supporting, not the regional chair, who's excellent, but the majority of them are not supporting the regional funding formula. And also, I think it would probably be good, if I may, is just to give a very brief update where ourselves and Waikato probably diverge from the rest of the mayors around the waters collaboration issue.
The funding, regional sports funding.
Yeah. So through the Chair, there's two things Councillor Galley referred to. So the first of all is the regional funding framework, which is a policy or a framework that our council has adopted. In fact, all the councils in the Waikato have adopted it, with the exception of the regional council, who actually proposed the framework in the first place. So this is a mechanism upon which initiatives such as the theatre, Waikato Regional Theatre, sports facilities, other community facilities could be discussed and potentially could be funded in the future. It doesn't bind any particular party to any course of action, but it's a framework upon which discussions can be held. Because the Regional Council declined to support the framework, Sport Waikato Chair, who is Sport Waikato as an entity, have written to the Regional Council, along with the Mayoral Forum, have also written to the Council, just expressing their frustration and disappointment that the framework that was proposed by the Regional Council then wasn't ultimately adopted by the Regional Council. The Regional Council's view is that it's something that they will consider at the next triennium. They feel it will be difficult to re-debate the matter in the current election cycle. So the Mayoral Forum, as I say, expressed frustration, disappointment, but nonetheless it still allows the councils who have supported the framework will still continue to advocate and discuss proposals where there is joint funding in the manner that we have with the Waikato Theatre.
So before we go off that, I had a question on that one. I know Gary does too, but I put myself in front of you, Gary, just don't have it on. So you're saying that the Regional Council, which has set itself up as the organisation that will handle the admin and funding collection and distribution for agreed regional projects, won't include sporting facilities in that framework that they've set up and sort of put on themselves?
Probably no. They have just not adopted the framework in total, Councillor Dave. So the framework, which covers sporting, community, recreational facilities, a whole range of things that their staff developed, that they as a council supported the development of, when it came to ultimately adopting the framework, they declined to adopt it by a narrow minority.
So would it be reasonable to question their relevance?
I think it's a political question. I think the frustration of the Mayoral Forum and the other entities was that the framework doesn't bind the Regional Council to anything, apart from agreeing a way that the councils will talk and discuss joint initiatives. Politically, I think it was seen as though by agreeing to the framework, it automatically bound them into funding things, which of course the framework doesn't automatically jump to that
Because each
conclusion.
individual project still has to be agreed across all the councils.
Has to be a business case, has to be a legitimate funding proposition. They may be sub-regional, they may be regional, but there's no automatic conclusion that just because it's a regional project, the regional council will be sought as a funding agent. That's project by project, and each business case to stack up in its own
And
right.
remind me, the regional council, which covers the whole region, of which Hamilton's population is about 45%, is it 4 out of 14 or 4 out of 16 councillors?
We have 4 members. I'm not sure the total number, Councillor
For
Dave.
2 extra Māori members, I'm not sure whether it's 14 or 16. So
My understanding was that there were some members absent for the meeting where this particular item was considered, and it was lost by a small number.
okay, thanks, Gary.
Just a question on clarity, Blair. The regional funding framework, is, just to be clear, my understanding is that should a facility be in conceptual facility be a thing, we're talking about doing it, this framework would be a mechanism or an ideology or methodology by which we could find funding throughout the region. It doesn't say that, yes, we'll do the project. It just says if this is considered to be a regional project with regional benefits, this is a logical, objective way of determining funding. Is that what the framework is?
Absolutely correct. And
Yeah.
I think it was, Gary, developed post the velodrome, where there was a project which was seen in a meritorious way, but there was a significant difficult process for which local government worked its way through that particular discussion. So this outlined a way that we could work together and discuss and evaluate whether there was something here of merit, and then how it would be funded.
And does it go beyond just capital funding? Does it also include
Yes, operational.
operational stuff? So, for example, libraries, we're in the to and fro with some neighbours regarding libraries. That could be something that was put into the regional funding framework.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Martin.
I mean, I think I stress that the chair of the regional council is strongly in favour of this regional funding formula, but this is yet another example where, frankly, local government in this country drops the ball. Don't wait around for local government, because in this case it won't happen. The next triennium, that's hopeless. I would like
Martin,
to suggest,
question,
can I just suggest, Mr. Chair, would there be merit, Blair, in your view, without cutting across the mayoral forum process, if this council at least wrote to our 5 regional councillors who represent the city, just to clearly 5? The 4 general seats and the Maori seat as well.
Represents an area wider than the city. It's
Oh,
north and
yes,
south.
but
Yeah, sure.
so,
take your point.
So I'm just wondering, in terms of at least, because I think it's through the chair, a really good that we let our reps know who sit on this regional council from this city, Greater Hamilton, whatever, where we stand and
So,
why
Martin,
we're pushing for this.
you're giving a speech in
Sure,
favour,
sure.
that's fine. I'm happy to include that, a resolution as,
Yeah,
to
okay,
that effect.
sorry, thank you,
Before
thank
we
you.
finish the
Sure, thank you.
whole item. Paula, thank you.
Thank you. As you're aware, I'm quite familiar with the history from its very genesis of this. They've obviously had some political fallout, or the ranks are not as tight as they were in terms of the philosophy, is that right? Or are there matters of detail? Because it was always difficult to administer, I would say that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Paul. I mean, obviously, I wasn't at their meeting where they declined the framework, but my understanding was that the discussion was closely tied with their long-term plan deliberations, and of course, their funding that they have committed to the theatre through that process. So I understand that their reluctance to adopt the framework was because they thought that by adopting the framework, it automatically led to a conclusion that they would then automatically fund all future initiatives that were seen as regional. Now, the framework doesn't create that obligation. It certainly provides that where things, there's a strong business case and where they are regional, that the regional council is a preferred funding source, but it doesn't automatically bind them to that. But I understand that the political discussions were seen that was linking that funding to the framework.
Part of the discussion previously was not only about providing the funding from the Waikato Regional Council's coffers, but it was somewhat about who would administer the funding of, in other words, who would be the fund holder and administer on behalf of the region, various regional funding assets. Is that off the table as well? I mean, it just like we did with the surf life saving, which was very slow-hanging fruit compared to what we're talking about, but being able to collect it in one place was administratively more effective and therefore more cost-effective for all the ratepayers across the region. Has that debate fallen off the radar?
No, I don't believe it has. I think the simple issue, if I boil it down to, was did adopting the framework mean the regional council was funding everything? That ticked the box.
So they felt that it was an obligation that everything would go their way.
That's my understanding. But I think that there's no doubt that the chair of the regional council has expressed their strong view that regional collaboration, as you put it, the gatehouse and the ability to potentially collect and fund on behalf of a wider area, those remain valid propositions.
Would we be able to access, I'm not sure what their minute taking is like now, I know what it was used to be like, would we be able to access the minutes of the meeting in which that decision was considered?
If I may.
Well, hang on, the question is, can we access regional council minutes?
I presume it's talking about either whatever occurred at the long-term plan.
I'm quite certain that anyone who needs to can access public minutes.
Through Councillor Gallagher's good detective work, he's already been supplied those detailed minutes and the voting
And he's
records.
going to distribute. Hey,
Okay.
we're getting in a bit of a...
So can we have those shared? Thank you.
Let's go through the process here. We've
Yep.
got questions. I'm putting up a resolution to the effect of what you've suggested, Martin, and you can, in the meantime, offer the minutes to Paula and anyone else who wants them. Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm just remembering, Blair, the Sport Waikato did a piece of work, the Waikato Regional Sports Facility Plan, and which was basically a way of working out throughout the whole region what could be built and where and how maybe costs could be, shared, and so everyone's not building their own assets, their own facilities. So where does this leave a body of work like that? Because surely it's an integral part of it is the funding side of it.
Yeah, so that body of work continues, Councillor, and it is a critical part of the wider collaborative discussions across the Waikato. So Sport Waikato continue to maintain and update that planning framework, and that ensures that there's discussions and visibility throughout the councils and their long-term planning processes. So that doesn't go away. The only thing that's occurred here is that we don't have an agreed framework across the regional council, along with the councils, on how those projects that the Sport Waikato, and also there's a creative Waikato process I've identified, may be funded.
Oh, surely that's critical to it, though.
Well, that
do all
was
this work and then you can't pay for it at the end.
And I guess through the
Sorry,
chair,
Paula and Martin, just...
I guess that's through the chair. That's why the Mayoral Forum expressed its strong unhappiness at the regional council's decision and wrote to the regional council in that regard. It's the same reason why Sport Waikato have also written to the regional council expressing exactly the same sentiments that you're referring to.
Okay. Can I suggest, can this council make some representation to the regional council? Can we go
That's
along
what Martin's asked for, and we're writing up a resolution to that effect, which will come...
Yeah, but I guess it's what sort of representation is what I'm talking about. Can we turn up at their front door and have a little chat about it at a meeting or something, not just write a letter, make a submission and actually turn up and, public forum stuff.
Well,
Because everyone can write a letter, but
the motion is broad enough, the proposed motion you'll see is broad enough to cover that, possibly. Siggy, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just following on from Councillor Taylor about Sport Waikato, and I'm not 100% sure, but did you, talking about finding out what's happening in the region, and I think because I'm living on the border to Waipa, I usually just get the Waipa Courier or Te Awamutu Courier, and I think I read that Waipa is building a sports centre in Ohaupu, and if we don't know about these things, we might be doubling up. So do we find out? Do you find out through this forum what's happening in that arena?
What you're referring to there, Councillor Siggy, is the initiatives that the Sport Waikato piece of work captures. So Sport Waikato are working across all of the councils, including our through General Manager Lance Vavort, and they understand all the initiatives and the future planned sport developments, and look for those opportunities where there may be collaboration across boundaries. So that is occurring as we speak.
And we will find out about these ones, not that we are building something and they're building something next door.
That's what this whole Sport Waikato program's been about, to ensure there's no surprises. Yeah.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
So, Councillor, just so it'll come up and when we do the motions later, well, I'll just read out what I've got down here, that the CEO and Mayor communicate to Waikato Regional Councillors this council's concern about the Regional Council's decision not to support the regional facilities funding process, which covers the sort of thing both that Martin and Jeff were talking about, doesn't restrict us to just a letter or a quiet conversation. Okay, so that'll come up when we come back to the start of the whole GM's report as item C, if that's all right. So we'll move on to the next one, which is Gordonton Road Corridor.
Sorry, just I wonder, with your leave, Blair, I also asked from the Mayor's forum if Blair could just give, and I'll say nothing, could you give a very succinct where there's a divergence on the waters approach?
Oh, sorry, you did ask that before.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. So some of the councils in the Waikato have decided to pursue an asset management collaborative initiative around water and wastewater. Hamilton City Council has elected at this stage not to be part of that group of the councils pursuing those discussions. So that is mainly the smaller councils looking at how they can collaborate in their asset management functions, much as occurs across the Waikato for our roading asset managers where there's collaboration. Hamilton and Waikato District Council at this stage are both not elected to be part of that process. Waikato, because they are in detailed discussions with Watercare around how Watercare can support their waters and wastewater arrangements. Hamilton, predominantly because our asset management functions are sophisticated and advanced. Notwithstanding that, we have the Mayoral Forum advised those councils who are working in the asset management space that Hamilton would like to stay involved as an observer, and where there are particular initiatives such as discussions around how wastewater mitigations can be considered, particularly around wastewater disposal into waterways, that Hamilton may wish to become involved as a party or a voice. But I think in simple terms, our interests as a council are certainly more driven around growth and growth planning for waters and wastewater, in particular within the Waikato Hamilton area, and we are working actively with our partners in those two areas to look at growth planning, consent alignment for water and wastewater. So we feel that's where our better energies are placed, as opposed to working across the entire Waikato area, particularly with the smaller councils who have a lot more work to do in the asset management space.
Thank you. Robin, on Gordonton Road Corridor now. So you're out of there, Blair.
Thank you.
Oh, someone added it. Oh, sorry, Norm. You've got to be more like Gary, get in at the start. Sorry.
Yeah, got to learn those tricks. Hey, just in regards to partnership, again, I want to reference the Waikato Taone Environmental Plan around infrastructure and what it means from a cultural point of view. Is Waikato Taone at the table as a partner in terms of managing mitigation and providing for the cultural framework or attribute around discharge in the three waters?
Good morning, Norm. Welcome to Council. Yes, they are. So through that partnership I referred to with Waikato and Waipa councils, I neglected to mention Waikato Tainui and Regional Council are also part of those discussions. So it's a developing work program, but it's specifically focused on all matters relating to water and wastewater in the growth area around Hamilton. And so iwi are a particularly critical partner in those discussions.
Yep. Again, we talked about it earlier around investing at the outset or at the start, so that there's no long-term financial complications down the track. And again, investing early around engagement is a key there, notwithstanding the RMA provisions reference the Waikato Taonui plan to ensure that Waikato Taonui at the table to provide for their thoughts and aspirations.
And certainly in the two hui that have been held, Waikato Taonui have been well represented and have given extremely valuable input. And I could also add that the corridor plan, which GM Jen referred to earlier in the agenda, that particular wastewater initiative has now been captured and included as one of the key initiatives in the corridor plan, such as the importance of all matters related to water and wastewater in the context of the Hamilton corridor plan area. We're giving it prominence because it's such a significant part of developing the growth and development of this area.
Thanks. Okay, third time lucky, Robin.
Thank you.
And Eva Lisa, are you kept there? So the Gordonton Road corridor. Got the notes there from staff. Is there anything you want to add to that, Robin?
No, I guess the only comment I would make is that since we have put the 60k speed restriction in on Gordonton Road, and there's been a lot of nice bright red paint put to reinforce that the folks working on site have actually noticed quite a decrease in speeds through their work site, which has been really pleasing because the speeds were quite high and safety was quite a major risk or concern for them at that time. So we are seeing that reflected on the ground.
Okay, Mark, thanks, who's been out to personally inspect the area.
Many times. It's wonderful. Thank you, Robin. Thanks for all your great work on that and your team. Just regarding point 31, I just want to keep the foot on that one. So can you please elaborate timing-wise what we can tell the residents of that area, what we're looking at for, perhaps extending that speed limit out, etc., to past Borman Road and things. Where exactly are we at?
Okay, so the business case approach has several steps along the way.
Yep.
And last week we had our final workshop, which was to come up with our preferred solution for Gordonton Road. Yep. So what we've been looking at specifically are intersection improvements for safety concerns. So that's the corridor from the Gordonton Wairere roundabout through north to include New Borman Road.
Yep.
So we've been looking particularly at the safety at intersections, but also the walking and cycling provisions along there. So that the preferred solution has been developed up. Currently we have funding in the long-term plan for implementation over the next couple of years. With the targeted enhanced so financial assistance rate project that NZTA have been putting up. We have put that on the list of one of the sites that we will be looking to try and see if we can fast track that work a bit quicker than that. So that's where we're at currently.
Okay, and Councillor Dave mentioned earlier on about the slight communication issues we're having with LTNZ at the moment, or through circumstances beyond our control. Is there anything we can do to...
For this business case, we're making some really good progress and we've had good support from the local team. So
great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Dave.
Thanks, Gary, please.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks, Robin. The heading of the item kind of confused me, Gordonton Road corridor, because I've always been familiar with the Gordonton Road intersection. So obviously I've missed this, there's some additional work beyond just the intersection. You sort of started, would you mind just expanding a little on that? Because I've missed that bit.
Okay. So basically when we started into this process, while we had the issue looming strongest at Gordonton Thomas, it was agreed that we should look at the bigger picture and not just rush in and deal with that and potentially end up with a solution that wasn't going to fit with the bigger and longer term picture that we needed to fit in with. So we had one of our early workshops was looking at the full length, and that gave us some surety as to where that was going to go and the sort of treatments that we were expecting and the long-term needs of that corridor. and then got in and focused on the Gordonton Thomas because that had the most
Can
immediate
you,
safety
so how far
needs.
does the corridor go?
So the corridor starts at the big roundabout at Wairau Drive, Wairau Gordonton roundabout.
Yep.
Pigeon thing.
And goes basically to the city boundary, so north of New Borman Road.
So that's where you get your Borman roads and coming in?
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you. So it'll be more, so that's not just a intersection solution, it's that,
It's
well, there'll be multiple intersections along there, but.
correct,
Okay.
yeah. So it's the safety at the intersections. It's looking at potentially longer term because the R2 piece of land, which sits between Gordonton Road and the expressway extent, will obviously make a big change to the needs in the longer term through there as well. There's a park that's to be developed just about opposite Puketaha Road, and just trying to bring all of those things into the picture and understand what we need to provide.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks. Thanks very much. We'll move on to the Access Hamilton Task Force report. And I'm just going to ask Mark, as the chair, to introduce that. He has an impassioned speech, I'm led to believe.
I'll wait till debate for that, thank
Okay.
you. But no, look, getting my head well and truly around Access Hamilton and the many different plans that it involves and all the different spokes. But look, the key topics are there. We'll take that as read. Thank you very much. Thank you to Robin and to Melissa in particular for making it easy for me to get involved in this. A couple of big things that we, and I will be impassionedly pleading for people to come along to get involved with is we've got a lot of people interested in the area of cycling. So we've got the CBD that's interested, we've got cycling groups and all these different people involved. So we're going to have effectively a 2 or 3 hour get together with all of them to put everything on the table and try and get, like Robin's doing with Gordonton, some cohesive plan. So there will be extensive nagging to elected members to come along to those things. But we've also integrated into the Access Hamilton the parking task force, still with the responsibility of Councillor Taylor. Simply because you can't do parking in isolation, it ties into the bigger picture. So really, look, I'll leave it over to you, Robin. I'm just really making this up now. Thank you.
So, Robin, is there anything specific you want to address before we go on? We've got a lot of questions and coming up.
I'm happy to probably take it as read and then perhaps leave it with Councillor Jeff to talk more about the parking, perhaps.
Yeah. Okay.
Do
you want to do that now, Jeff?
No, I don't know. If the questions might be on Access Hamilton rather than parking.
Yeah, let's come back to parking depending on the questions that come up because we want to get into them. I've got James first.
Thank you, Chair. Robin, do we have any sort of idea what this youth concession fare for public transport is, what it's going to cost the Hamilton ratepayer per person, per trip?
Are we going to sorry, are we jumping into that?
As in what it would cost the ratepayer to subsidise a trip?
So I can answer, provide some guidance in terms of the response to that question. At the moment, the cost to the ratepayer is being looked at via alternative revenue sources. So we're hoping that the cost to the ratepayer is $0.
Zero.
The additional cost, I think, because there's all for every current user, there's already a cost.
Yeah. Yes.
But the additional cost, if you were to bring something like this, is what Evelise is referring to.
So the aim is to actually have an opportunity to fund that using other methods to provide that the fare free for youth in the city.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Rob.
Chair, my questions are around the parking. Do you want me to ask those questions now, or do you want me to wait until after?
Right. It is all mixed in, Rob, and
Okay.
if necessary, I'll give Jeff a chance to comment on them, but you ask away.
Right.
And Lee Valise has done a lot of work on that too.
Okay, all right. Well, my questions are around page 59 and 60 of the report. And
this is
as
the-
you would
this
expect,
is the attachment at the
around
end.
the financials, yeah.
Actually, sorry, Rob, I probably misspoke there. I think it might be better to just pull that out and have a discussion about that after we've done other non-parking things. Still, as
Okay,
part-
that's fine.
Yeah,
Look, I'll-
that's my fault for
Okay.
not realising we were probably going to get into a big area there.
Okay,
Which is
okay.
fi-
So you would like me to wait until
Yeah,
after
I'll come back to
councillor
you.
Taylor has given his
Well,
address?
let's do the non-parking ones, come
Yep,
back to that
okay,
and then tie
okay,
it all
that's
up. Okay, my fault, sorry. So just if you've got parking questions relating to that part of the report starting as attachment 259, we'll just save them. Ryan?
Thanks, Chair. Just regarding youth concession fares, great intent, so acknowledge that. I appreciate, you acknowledge in the report, Robin, there's some work to be done, etc. And you've initially flagged $650,000 in revenue via the fringe parking. I guess in that, there'd also be what's not showing is the cost in collecting that revenue, which would obviously eat into that to some extent potentially, or?
Yes, so the idea was to use the Pay My Park app and to absolutely minimise the costs associated with actually collecting that funding. So it was not looking at putting a lot of infrastructure out in the form of kiosks, for example, but to try and keep that as a lean operation.
Is the Pay My Park, is it still got to be checked by a person?
Yes, so there will still need to be parking enforcement officers working in the area.
Yep. And again, apologies if this is something you'd tag in the report, but I guess the report hasn't been commissioned yet. There'd be the need to look at unintended consequences potentially of CBD.
Yes, I guess
Pushback?
what we're looking for here is to try and get some direction, some feeling from councillors as to whether this is something they would like us to do additional work on. So we've done some initial investigation just to understand the sort of numbers and how it might work. There is additional work needed to certainly look at unintended consequences and to understand, what the potential impact would be from, do people actually walk further and park? So, rather than pay for parking, do they park a little further away and then walk? So what's the impact on those areas? Or do they actually say, actually for a couple of extra dollars I may as well park in town? So there's those sorts of things that we would certainly be investigating. And we did a quick survey of staff around that sort of thing, and there seems to be quite a lot of elasticity around people, whether they'll pay that or not. So that would be the sort of additional work that we would do if councillors had an appetite for us to continue working on this.
Okay, and to scope that sort of work out, what would the likely cost be, do you think, ballpark, in terms of?
It's probably, in order to do a business case type approach, we could be getting up to about $50,000, I think. We would have to go out and obviously do quite a lot of surveying of people who are parking.
Is that
those areas.
gross cost, or is that net after FAR subsidy?
I would say gross.
Gross, so the subsidy would be 50 to 75% range.
Yes.
So sorry, to pick that point up, can you get a subsidy for doing the report by NZT? By
Preparation in these areas, yeah.
There is potential. That would be something that we'd certainly look at very early on to see that we could, because this is around reducing the amount of single occupancy cars coming into the city every day. So the aim would be to get some funding through this mechanism, but to also encourage people to look at walking and cycling and PT. So that's where it kind of fits really nicely with that youth concession as well.
Okay. I'll be happy to support, if you need a motion, Chair, to progress this. I'll be happy to be part of it.
Yeah, I'll think about the motion part of this, because this is not something, this was an update, and the work's being done at the Access Hamilton Committee, and no decisions can be made by that body until they are run by this committee. Staff have authority to work generally in this area anyway, but maybe not specifically on a business case, so that might be area where we have to do something specific. So we'll think on that while the discussion is going on. Thanks, Ryan. Leo, thanks.
Just dealing with the youth concession. The chair of Access Hamilton said people are getting really excited about the cycling. And yet if you look on paragraph 41, third bullet point down, there's only 3% of kids actually cycle to school. That's unbelievable. Whereas 48% of them get driven to school. Are we not looking at this the wrong way around? And 18% are using the bus. So, you know, we're trying to get our kids active and all this sort of stuff, either by walking or cycling. And we're spending a lot of money on cycleways and cycle lanes and all that sort of stuff. And yet people just aren't, well, the kids are not using it. My observation are the only ones who are sort of riding cycles and this sort of stuff around the place are elderly people in high-vis jackets and a flag on the back of their bike. So I wonder, you know, is there another way we've got to approach this? Somehow, you know, we don't even have bike sheds at school anymore.
Leo, perhaps I could just draw your attention to Rotatuna High School, where it's exactly the opposite. In fact, they're running out of room for cycle racks and having to put in more and find funding for more, and they have over 60% of kids cycling to the school. Now, what you say is...
That's only one school.
Sorry?
That's only one school in Hamilton.
It's also the newest and biggest high school.
Yeah, I know. And it's got the infrastructure there to support it.
Yep.
For the cycling, and I fully agree with that. But somehow we've got to make it cool for kids to ride a bike again. And how do we do this? Give them a free bus pass? I don't think so.
So I think basically we're looking at multiple ways for people to get, or particularly youth, to get to school. And this, while this program is talking specifically about PT, there is a lot of work being done in the cycling area, and we're doing some really good work in with schools, encouraging cycling and providing cycle skills and that sort of thing. The reality is, even if you get a lot of people cycling, if you get a wet, horrible winter's day, people will look at an alternative transport, and that's, you know, so that's where the PT can actually work in hand with that as well. I don't think it's, you're not going to get people just using one mode all of the time, but what we're trying to do is get less people using cars, mainly.
Look, I fully understand that, but somehow we've developed a culture that kids have to be driven to school. How do we change it? I don't know.
Councillors, could I suggest that anyone concerned about that come along to the Access Hamilton discussions? Probably 2/3 of every meeting is wrestling with that exact problem. That's what we're trying to do. We all recognise that during school periods our transport congestion problems are the worst, and that's so we're very definitely trying to focus on that and solutions to that. But so keep on with the order. I've got Gary. Thanks.
Thank you. Regarding the youth one, paragraph 46 says commuter parking initiatives in the CDB fringe have been considered as one possible avenue for gathering necessary funding, blah, blah, blah. Just expand on that. Is that to fund the business case, or is that to fund the loss in revenue from having youth getting it free?
Yeah, the second.
Okay. So how does that work in with our free parking scheme?
The commuter parking is the fringe area outside the initial CBD area, which is where the 2 hours free operates. So this is outside of that area.
So the people who park there now in those places will be penalised, will they?
They're commuter parkers who are currently parking for free.
So they're what?
They're commuters, so they're coming in, generally staying for 8 hours, and are currently free.
Yep, so it wouldn't be free after that?
No.
So what would that likely look like? How much would we be talking about?
So the initial fund is outlined in 48. Paragraph 48 was a rate of $5 was what the initial proposal was. But if we were to carry on doing some more work, that would be one of the things that we'd be looking at is, you know, what is the rate that you actually apply, and how much, how high can it go before people basically start looking at alternate options.
So, of course, I mean, those are just, I mean, we call them commuters, but of course they're just the people who are coming into town to work, aren't they? So
Correct.
they're your next door neighbour who happens to work in town. Yeah. And that's appropriate, you think? Is it for them to be funding?
Well, again, it's about trying to look at people using potentially alternate modes. So it's understanding that there is a price for having cars parked on the road every day, and looking at how we can encourage potentially youth coming through and getting into some good habits and understanding the bus system at an early age.
Gary,
Is the
just on the
unpredictability-
people coming in and using the parks, there is anecdotal evidence which we've asked staff to see if there's a way of doing some sort of measurement that non-Hamilton residents, the 49,000 vehicles that come in and out each day, are also parking in those areas, and so how much of it is them, how much is Hamilton residents?
Yep. So it's ironic, today we've got a bus strike on. Of course, I'm not aware of ever private vehicle owners going on strike. So my point is that if we suddenly get an increase in people dependent on publicly funded, public provided transport, and this is not the first strike we've had a litany of them in the last year, our whole transport mechanism is subject to ransom by public service sector unions.
I think yes.
Oh,
Is that a statement or a question?
Well, by unions.
Is that a question, Gary?
Yeah, no. So that's what consideration is given to that? Because, like I said, Mum and Dad never go on strike with the car, but the buses are frequently on strike.
So what's the question?
So what have you factored that in? I mean, there will be time if we've got tons and tons of people coming to school on buses, and as is happening quite regularly now, the buses are on strike. What do we do?
That would be one of the things that we would investigate as part of the additional work, and have a look at that and see how big a risk that actually is.
So how do you factor that in?
Well, that we'd get experts in to do that sort of work, but I think it's about understanding how often it does happen, and you know, they're still walking and cycling, and on the odd occasion still using a car. The key services were still being provided by the public transport operators this morning. So I don't think, but that would be something we'd
I thought they all went on strike from 5 a.m. to 11 or something.
That's
They still
Auckland.
ran key
We don't run
services.
that time.
They were still running key services first thing this morning. So my expectation is, but that would be something that I'd have to check with regional council. My expectation is that the school kids would have still got to school, and the workers will have still got to work first thing this morning. And my understanding is.
So did the buses strike or not in town, in Hamilton?
The drivers strike, not the buses.
Yeah. Were their buses running this morning?
Yes.
All of the buses were running this morning?
There were probably not all of the buses, but I understand that they were providing key services. But that would be something that we'd have to investigate and understand better.
Okay. I know you've got some figures in here. What do you think it'll cost?
So we've been working closely with the regional council.
Yeah.
And they've provided an estimate of 2.5 to 3.3 million. So those costs.
Is that across the region, or that's Hamilton's
No,
cost?
that's in Hamilton.
Okay.
And that's the cost, the additional cost for putting on additional buses and routes and that sort of thing. So that's where we're really dependent on their expertise, and that would be if we get the go-ahead to do further investigation and to do the business case, then that's the sort of stuff that we need to investigate and understand better.
That's predicated on people taking up, so there'll be a whole lot of assumptions in that making it free will bring so many extra kids going on the buses. As a consequence, we'll have to have these buses running.
Correct.
Okay. How do they get that estimate? What are they assuming, that how many percentage of people will take it up?
I can't remember the exact percentage, but I think that's the sort of thing where we'd actually be going out and doing some good customer surveys to actually understand better what, again, is price the issue that's stopping parents allowing youth to ride on buses. They're the sorts of things that we've got to investigate further and to understand what that sort of take-up will be. There's also opportunities for working in with the schools who are running their own private school buses as well. So, you know, there's several parts to this that need to be pulled together.
So that will come from the indicative business case, the cost, that the $100,000 to $150,000 business case
Correct.
work, which Hamilton City Council will fund?
No, we're requesting that regional council take the lead in that. So we'd be looking to.
So our we're 40%, I don't know.
50,000 is what Robin mentioned before as our share of that, Gary.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Paula, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick questions. It's fair to say, isn't it, that we're at the very early stages of this conversation. In fact, it was one of the first robust conversations we had which was at the last Access Hamilton meeting. So, as part of this study, there are going to be a lot of things brought to the table that we haven't quite got to yet, like, for example, would this operate across the timetable, or would it be just at peak service time? What impact would this have in terms of displacing potentially full fare paying adults, because students are already to a certain extent subsidised, so every younger person on a seat, we need to find some more money from somewhere. So all of those things, I understood from the Access meeting which I was at, that Waikato Regional Council were going to provide us some more breakdown and information around that, and we haven't seen it yet, have we? No. So we will see that. We will see the impact, the timetable impacts, the impact on other fare-paying adults. Another question, also around the timing. We haven't. It's fair to say that we noted at Access Hamilton that the timing, the rollout of things like the integrated ticket solution, which is necessary, right, for us to be able to identify these as free bus users. That's still to be discussed in greater detail.
It's scheduled for 1 April now. They've just told us on Friday.
Oh, good. Good. So we'll be expecting to hear some update about that so that this trial can go ahead. The other thing is the investment versus the investment in other potential bus service delivery enhancements, such as bus preferential routes. We talked about that. We talked about, well, on the one hand, getting more people on the bus. That's one way to...
Sorry, Paula, are you asking a question or just going through the decision or discussion at Access Hamilton?
I'm asking a question. So on the one hand, we did discuss the money spent to get more bottoms on the bus, right? More people in the seats versus what impact on congestion bus lanes would have and other mechanisms. So that information will also come back at the next phase?
Yes, there's that sort of thing, and I think that also fits in very strongly with the mass transit business case that we're looking at, which is where you start looking at where would you have dedicated bus lanes, for example. So they go hand in hand.
So all you're asking us for today is to progress what we've had as a very broad and early conversation. You're asking us to progress into looking at some of the detail of these aspects. Is that that's what we're being asked to do today?
Yes.
Thank you. And just another point, a question. The University of Waikato, with their parking charges, used to offset some of their parking charges for student bus initiatives, yes? So they're
student and staff.
Student and staff.
Yeah.
So that's still ongoing.
Yes.
So we'd be looking at how successful that initiative was as well and bringing that information to the table?
Yes.
Because if it works for them, it potentially could work on a bigger scale, yes?
Yes, it could do. At Wintec, for example, it may be employers could take up something as well. So.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paula. Jeff, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, do you mind if I just wanted to supply a bit of clarification just on an earlier question, just quickly. It's not, so I'm not asking a question, but I just wanted to... Councillor Hamilton asked a very good question about what work needs to be done in regards to the fringe parking, the charging commuters for parking there. And the point I wanted to make was that my understanding was that basically that was going to be part of some work that we need to do anyway. We need to do more work in time for the next annual plan on our parking strategy for Hamilton as a whole. You know, how would this fringe parking fit in with 2 hours free in the CBD? What is our philosophy for how we treat Frankton, parking in Frankton or Hamilton East, or Wintec or the university or the DHB or Rototuna, now that we're getting some new demands for parking there. So my understanding is that we're doing some work, we need to do some work anyway on our parking strategy, and as part of that, this fringe parking could be fitted into that, and it would be done in time for the annual plan. So, thank you.
Thanks. Siggy, please.
Mr. Chair. On the youth concession fares, I mean, how you mentioned a little bit about that you have talked to the schools, and how keen are they to have come up with some ideas to support that school children will use more public transport and
So we've done no engagement with the schools on this specific project. We've got some engagement going on through the School Link project on the Peach Grove Whakanui length, but that would be part of this work. If we were to proceed, that sort of engagement with the schools, with the community and those sorts of things is the work that needs to be done. All we've done is had a very high level look at this to understand what sort of numbers are associated with for cost, and now we're looking for some guidance as to whether councillors would like us to do more work, understanding that we're starting to look at a business case.
Okay, great. The other question I have is in regards to concession fares for disabled users. Do you have any sort of general idea of how many users there would be?
So I understand, Councillor Dave, you might be able to give an update.
Look, there's a decision made at the Regional Passenger Plan meeting on Thursday last week, which I emailed you the sort of high-level thing about, to say that that committee is proposing it officially to the Regional Council, which was sometime next month. I can't remember the date, sorry. And that the cost was in the order of 150,000 per year. And the proposal is that for the rest of this financial year, if it started when the electronic ticketing system comes in, 1st of April, would be borne out of existing regional council funds, and that from the start of the next year, i.e. 1st of July next year onwards, there should be an additional charge to cover it of about $2 per Hamilton ratepayer. So that was the sort of, as far as the discussion went, the details have to be worked out by the regional council.
Okay. Oh, great. Thank you. Just one more question was on the commuter parking initiatives in the CBD fringe. Do we have to talk to the homeowners that are, you do on the fringe, that are on these roads that we classify as the CBD fringe, that people, well, a lot of them are already used by commuters, but do we have to talk to them about that?
Yes.
Yeah, we do.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So Martin, thank you.
Just on the commuter CBD and fringe parking, I assume, smart cities and different apps. So what you're saying through the chair is that you're looking at how people pay for parking.
Correct.
We could even charge Tamahiri residents more. That's a potential thing with the app. But no, I never said that. But just the other thing is, with regard to things like either the home of cricket and the West Town Management Belt and passing red, it seems to me that we need to unravel those, because clearly I can't see with the home of cricket and other developments on the West Town Belt, we're anticipating long-term parking on our reserves.
That would... So with any of these schemes, and it's the same as in the CBD where we've got 2 hours free, we then have localised areas of different restrictions for motorcycles, taxis and that sort of thing. So we would be, as part of this, looking at where we needed to have specialised or shorter term parking provided as well.
Are we also doing, with respect, and I pick up Councillor Ziggy's point around the all-day parking outside a residential area, as against people could pay and actually commute park in a parking building and all that. Are we looking at the actual number of parking that is, like supply and demand, At the moment, we have the Sunning Hill car park that we provide. If there's a development there, that may disappear. But I'm just looking at, are we looking at how many sort of pay parks are available at a reasonable rate at the current time? Because obviously off-street pay parks versus on-street pay parks all day.
And that's part of that price elasticity and
Yeah.
actually understanding, because obviously Hamilton City have control of some off-street car parks.
Yeah.
But there's an awful lot of off-street car parking that's available from other people. So that would be part of the work, is to understand, you know, if it was as cheap to park off-street closer to work as what it was to park in the commuter area, then you're just going to move people into the CBD. So it's about understanding that. Yes.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Thanks. Sorry, Ryan.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick question. With the potential sharing of the TFR rate, can we, as council, to go ahead with this is a little bit down the track, can we do it subject to that rate rather than go in boots and all and then we don't get the funding and then we're left holding the baby?
So certainly from an NZTA perspective, the business case will be the critical part for that, and we would know at that stage whether we were going to be successful in getting that enhanced FAR rate.
So there would be a final decision to be made by this council after we know the result of those discussions.
Cool, thank you.
Norm, thank you.
Kia ora. Just in regards to the Access Hamilton Task Force, I just wanted to ask the question around the topics covered, and if there's been any consideration in regards to Indigenous placemaking, cultural values, cultural narrative, design principles around how they could be factored into some of the improvements. One point here, road naming, amongst other things. Is that considered as part of the opportunities going forward?
Yeah, I can respond to that briefly, or do you want to?
No,
Okay. By way of example, we had a discussion regards the splitting of some roads, and we're right in the middle of that, right at the moment, actually, so we'd welcome you along to that one.
The splitting, meaning that there'll be a requirement for some new road names.
New road names. Yeah, with the expressway going through, and you can't call it east and west anymore, etc. We can always do more. Yeah, so come along.
Just my other question was in regards to engagement. I was going to talk around having a korero or conversation with the schools, again having a focused conversation with Kura Kaupapa Māori and Māori schools, and even Kohanga Reo, a lot of early learning centres around the place, and how they move their kids to and fro from the kura and home. Just factoring that into the
Norm,
conversation.
we already have I'm not sure how it's actually written up in the policy, but certainly an action that takes place whenever we have major arterial routes through an area. There is a consultation with iwi process about the naming of key roads, and that's, for instance, how Wairere Drive got its name originally, and several others as well. But there's a lot of existing roads like Gordonton Road, which we have been there ever since settlers got to the area, which we can't change. But brand new roads, there's certainly those discussions take place.
Yeah, and just a statement of reaffirmation more than anything around how we can reinvigorate and restore the cultural associations and cultural narratives of those places and spaces. So, tēnā koe.
Thanks. Rob?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Robin, you mentioned in response to one of the questions that the $3.3 million cost would be largely for further buses and new routes. Does the indicative costing that we've got at this stage take into account that there would be less revenue on existing routes, given that these younger people will not pay fares or not pay as much in the way of fares?
Yes, that was also a
So that's in there, yeah. How will we police, if it did go ahead, how would we police the concession rate solely for Hamilton residents, given that Hamilton is funding it, as opposed to those from outside the city who might be young and ride bus routes around the city and to and from school?
So I guess that would be something, again, that we'd need to put into the business case, the integrated ticketing system, I think gives us some really good opportunities for addressing that, because my understanding is that it can do all sorts of smart stuff. So that would be where we would look at that system dealing with that issue.
So it's possible to do it?
Yeah, Rob, at the Passenger Transport Committee, we've had that same query also come up in relation to disability concession.
Yep. And
it can identify a youth from inside the city versus a youth with an address from outside, electronically. Yeah.
So last question is, are we confusing the market by Hamilton doing this alone when the regional council has the responsibility for looking after the buses? And, you know, I mean, this looks as if, to me, reading this is a Hamilton-only initiative. Maybe we should be recommending to Waikato Regional Council that they take this on board, because eventually they will charge it through their rates rather than us having to add another potentially 0.75%, which I've worked out as being the $1 million net cost to us that we will need to add on to our ratepayers. So we have a charge, and in addition to that, Waikato Regional Council are already charging Hamilton ratepayers for running the regional bus service anyway. So I guess my question is, should we be bouncing all of this back to regional council and saying, this is what Hamilton would like, you run it, you bill us, or you bill our residents for it through your rating system rather than us doing it through ours?
So we are certainly expecting the Waikato Regional Council to take a lead on this, because the impact is very much around the services. I think your suggestion is one that should be considered. So, you know, there will be a number of options looked at as to how the funding is sorted, and that would be one of the ones that would certainly be investigated.
Okay,
Rob, just by way of an earlier version of this, when the City Council wanted an orbital bus service before we had one, we went to the Regional Council out of their LTP period, cycle if you like, and put a proposal to them to set up the orbiter, and they agreed, subject to us underwriting the funding up to $800,000 a year for the next 2.5 years, or about similar sort of period at that time. As it turned out, the cost was only about $650,000 a year. After they got that period, it was put into the LTP and charged by them to ratepayers, so no longer was a charge against us. And we may potentially be...
So there's a precedent
in that sense.
having already happened.
And a similar quantum, actually. Yeah.
Okay. That's good. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. So that's that. Councillors, I'm just following Ryan's point earlier on a resolution to go into this report about supporting contribution to the indicative business case, so that gives staff a steer in that area. So I'll get that written out before we get round to GM report approval.
Chair, just wondering,
yeah.
Councillor Jeff's point, whether it's worth coordinating or lumping them together, or I don't know, you'd know that better than anyone, I guess. In terms of the work, the scoping work that needs to be done with the parking, whether there's a way of...
My understanding is that staff are doing that anyway, putting the... Well, they've got two strands. They've got... and the Regional Council is largely doing the PT costings and planning potential work, where we're doing the revenue work, which it covers all that parking stuff. But
if I may, through the chair, so just taking on Councillor Taylor's point, I think in terms of incorporating the wider Hamilton approach into that parking strategy, it would be good to have some guidance from elected members as to whether we could actually pull them together in that resolution and bring that back to elected members in one.
So you're writing that up at the moment, are you, Evelisa, if you want to do that?
So it's something, yes. So it's something incorporating a parking management plan for whole of city, so that we can incorporate all of the discussions that we've had today, so we get
Well,
a good
we're not going to
informed
put this up, discuss this now, because
No.
it's too airy-fairy. We will before the end of the motion, over lunch. Either Lisa and Robin will be working on that with Jeff, and you, if you wish, to get the wording to cover all of it.
Okay.
Good. Yep. Good teamwork. Because otherwise we'll be sitting waiting too long. We'll come back to that. Okay, thanks for that discussion. So we're just moving on to the Regional Passenger Transport Plan, which, Robin, are you doing that, or?
Just checking, do you want to do parking?
Oh, yes, sorry,
Parking,
sorry, Rob.
yeah.
Yeah, I just got reminded.
Okay.
We're doing the parking on page, which specially refers to one on page 59. And Jeff, did you want to introduce that briefly, since you were handling that?
So, Chair, I'll just provide a bit of an introduction and then leave it to probably Eva, Lisa for most of the questions. Happy to introduce this latest report, which, as Dave says, is on page 59 it starts. It's for September and basically showing really good trends in terms of parking occupancy, in terms of financials, continued trend of tracking just ahead of the budget that we have. If we just start with the financial figures briefly, as you know, the trial always meant basically sacrificing a sum of money revenue from parking meters. So that's not news as such, that's already been baked into the LTP and taken into account with the approved budget figures that you see on page 59. What we are seeing is that revenue from parking meters is slightly down on the predicted revenue that we had in the budget. But we're also seeing that we're more than making up for this in terms of the revenue from parking infringements and traffic infringements, which is well ahead of where we expected it to be. So overall, if you look at on page 59, you've got a total revenue figure of 781,000 in bold there, 319, and that's the budgeted. That's ahead of the budgeted figure, which was 524,000 so far. So as I say, we can answer questions on this. In terms of the trial, the technology is basically firing on all cylinders. If you look at page 61, for the last 3 months, in the blue there, the parking infringements over July, August and September, they've been really high. And our view on that is probably there's a degree of people maybe testing the system. People were possibly getting away with parking for a bit longer beforehand, but now the technology is firing on all cylinders and they're getting picked up. It's not ideal of that sort of high infringement rate, but then again, if it's getting people to park for the correct time so that the system functions as it should, and the CBD is for the short-term parkers or shoppers, then that's just the way it needs to be at the moment. I'm hoping, or we're hoping, that figure of infringements will come down a bit. Just briefly on the occupancy figures, so you're looking at average occupancy, and what page is that on? On page 63 there's a summary of it. So as you know, the CBD is broken down into 4 precincts. So the 2 central precincts are Barton. Barton by August had reached 86%, which is at the really high end of occupancy. You'd be aware that in the past we've talked about a sweet spot, that balance between enough going on in town and actually being able to find a park when you're in there. So 86% was at the high end. By September we've been slightly down to 83%, and we think that possibly that drop could be again because the technology is being applied, enforcement's being applied, and there's a few less people trying things on. Bear in mind, of course, that if you take the whole picture of this, occupancy's gone up from October 2017, when the trial was introduced. It was 70% in that Barton area, and now it's 83%. The civic precinct's pretty similar, 84% for September, again slightly down from 86% in August. And if you go back to October 17, when the trial was introduced, it was at just 67%. And just lastly, the northern and southern precincts on the outer edges of the CBD, occupancy is significantly less. It's still gone up significantly from when the trial was introduced. But what we're really looking at is people are really hammering the two precincts, central precincts, And what we really need to do is encourage people, I would suggest particularly with Christmas coming up, to look to park a bit further away in those other precincts. Anyway, that's a summary there, and I'll pass over for Eva-Lisa for questions, and I can answer any questions too. Thank you.
You okay with that? You ready to go for questions? I've got Rob first and then Gary.
Chair. Just looking at page 59, which is the financial summary, the infringement in revenue, which Councillor Taylor has referred to, is well up. Does that include a provision in there for non-recoveries? Because my recollection is we often do have a very high rate of non-recoveries or infringements which are subsequently written off, given the explanations that we might get from the infringer.
Yes, they are. So they're incorporated within that budget.
So there's an expectation of what revenue we should actually get from those infringement notices.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Just looking at parking meter revenue, that's running at about 70,000 for the 3 months, which is about 280,000 for the full year, compared with 1.39 million that we received in 16-17. If I remember back to this time last year when we had a similar report, the deficit from parking meter revenue was running at about 800,000 on an annualised basis. Yes. It's now sort of crept up to about 1.1 million if I annualise our quarterly revenue with what we were getting prior to the trial period commencing. Is that a reasonable expectation as to what the loss of revenue in the CBD is, about 1.1 million on what we used to get?
Yes, so it's sitting around that $1 million mark on comparable from the previous year's revenue received.
Okay, so that's a fair indicator as to what the project is actually costing us in lost revenue.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. And just one last question. I like all the graphs in that, but I guess one important bit of feedback that I've been keen to see, and I haven't seen a lot of it as yet, is what impact that $1 million cost, lost revenue, is having on retailers and CBD businesses. And I understood that there were stats that we could get from credit card sales and all of those sorts of things.
Rob, item 7.3 on page 64.
Have I missed that, have I?
I don't know whether you've missed it or what, but
7.4.
7.3, the chart.
Yep.
Up in the middle of the left of the.
Oh, okay.
And the bottom section is the central city zone, the sort of dark aqua colour on my.
Yep. So at the moment, we receive those results now on a quarterly basis.
Yep.
We, as at the time of the report being written, we hadn't received the October results, so they will be actually published in the November or next GNI committee meeting in terms of an update and via the Access Hamilton.
So can we do some sort of, use these stats to do some sort of cost-benefit analysis to see whether or not, the improved revenue in the CBD, where it actually sits with the lost revenue that the city's actually funding?
Yes, so Vanessa from the Hamilton Central
CBD,
Business
yep.
Has also asked for that, just to get some data to show the picture of the benefits of the 2-hour free within the city in terms of the businesses. So that she also indicated that there are pedestrian counts that we are now able to utilise, and so unfortunately we didn't have them before the trial, but we do have them now. We've asked, Access Hamilton Task Force have asked us to come up with some metrics to show some data in regards to that as well.
So given that the trial has still got 9 months left to run, because it still is a trial, isn't it?
Yes, it's still a trial.
To June of next year, will we have will we have reliable stats available well before the trial finishes so that we can evaluate whether or not the trial becomes a permanent fixture going forward?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you. From your graph, your grid on page 59, it would seem that, just to be clear, parking infringements, we all know what they are. I assume that's people overstaying their time, presumably?
Yes.
Yep. And the traffic notices, and I've had this explained to me, but just clarify, do we get a cut of when our people pick someone up with an expired rego or something like that? Do we get a cut of that, or is that the full fee?
We get a percentage.
Okay, so say the fine is $200, we get, do we get half? Do we get half?
50%.
Okay, all right. So I'm not too sure what your thinking is, but the business model here is that we want more criminals. Is that right? Because we only get it we basically, our source of funding is from people breaking the law, either overstaying or not maintaining their registration and things like that. Is that a sustainable business? And I mean this seriously. Is that a sustainable business model? Because there is, obviously, our parking meet our legitimate. And when I say legitimate, I don't mean the others illegal, but from legitimate customers. We just lost the plot, haven't we?
So our aim is to increase the vibrancy of the CBD by offering 2 hours free. We hope that the technology provides that people are more compliant, therefore don't get the infringements. And so the Access Hamilton Task Force have actually asked for a breakdown of what those infringements actually are so that they have more detail into those. But we're definitely not the aim to be compliance and enforcement focused. It's around vibrancy. So we aim to educate and then...
what you aim is great, but what you're getting...
What we're getting at the moment
is a significant increase in income from people breaking the law.
Yes, and that's where we're getting a breakdown to understand where those infringements are actually coming from, and the task force has asked for that information because they have raised those same concerns.
So by that you mean what parts of the city are people particularly overstaying? Is that what you mean? Is that what you mean by where it's coming from?
Yes, so the parking infringements also include people parking in loading zones. So it's just understanding what the breakdown of what those infringements are.
Okay, so if we do get better compliance, because people over time realise you can't park in a loading zone at all, and you can't, and it costs you to park for more than 2 hours, and it's worthwhile updating your rego and things like that. We lose another. Annualising the current $547,000 is about $2 million. Well, it's actually $2.2 million of revenue. If that would.
Yes. If everybody is compliant, we would lose.
There's another $2 million down the tube, eh?
So in terms of parking and traffic notices, the budget that's approved this year is $1.4 million.
Yep, but if we get complete compliance. Okay, so if everyone returns their book to the library on time, if everyone gets out of there in 119 minutes, and if everyone, we will lose, or the ratepayer will lose, based on the annualised September figures, $2.2 million.
So I'm not too... So in terms
I'm
yes,
just saying, if the $547,000 revenue we're currently getting for the first quarter, now it may or may not be accurate to annualise that, there will be another $2.2 million of income foregone. Now it'll never go to zero, but that's how much we're reliant on people breaking the law, isn't it, to keep this thing afloat?
So there is also the potential that instead of people getting infringement notices, they actually pay for the parking. So while it's 2
Beyond
hours
the
free,
2 hours.
yes, so they do have the ability to pay for the parking.
Presumably
so-
that happens now. That's not going to change, is it?
Well, I think that's part of why they're getting tickets, is because they're taking the 2 hours free and then not paying
Forgetting.
that $6. So that's part of what Evelisa was saying, is understanding
Okay.
where those infringements are coming from. If we had a fully compliant society, yes, we would lose the income from infringements and the traffic notices, but there is an expectation that there would be an increase in parking meter revenue.
Okay, if we got fully compliant, we'd never replace the traffic notice money, because if people are fully compliant, we'll never get that. But we might, the parking infringements, which are hard to, but 1 minute over, you get and I've got these things, they're about $40, aren't they?
Or it depends on the areas that you're
Okay,
parking in.
all right.
Yeah.
So even if we go fully compliant, we will lose the parking, the traffic notices, but we'll replace $143 worth of parking infringements with a significantly lower amount of parking revenue.
Potentially, yes.
Okay. All right, so it only works if people are crooks.
So, Mr Chair, can I just respond to that?
Oh, no, I don't, we'll get into debates about human nature. Oh, save it to these.
No, I'm not missing any points.
I just don't want the debate now around the table, because I've got Leo next. I did have someone else, but they've gone off. Leo? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I wonder if you can help me, please. On page 59 at 2.1, it says here that the infringement revenue and costs received from the courts under other revenue. Now, my understanding is that if somebody doesn't pay their $12 parking infringement, they get 28 days to pay. If that's not paid, they then get a reminder notice, which gives them another 28 days, which is a total of 56 days. If that's not paid, then it gets lodged into the court. My understanding is it costs us $30 to lodge an information in the court. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then what do we get back? $12, is it? From if they court pays.
It's $12 plus costs. So I don't know the exact figure.
But the costs go to the court.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're paying $30 to get 12, is that correct?
We're paying $30 to get the value of the fine plus.
Which is $12.
And then we recoup the.
No, we get our costs charged through the court system. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, so. So in terms of the infringements that are going to court, they could be the traffic infringements as well as the parking
Sure.
infringements. So it's.
So if somebody hasn't paid their warrant of fitness, which is $200, which they'll get, we should get $100 back, and the other 100 goes to Treasury, right? Ministry of Transport, and then into Treasury.
My understanding, correct.
Yeah. And, okay, we're okay if it's a yellow broken lines or something like that, which is $60, not your $12. Yeah, look, my understanding is that all we get back is the fee. Now, I could be wrong on that. It's a while since I did.
Leo, they did change the arrangements a few years ago after the National Parking Association, which John Purcell and others have been members of. They changed it because it was exactly what you were saying, we were getting less back than it was costing us to chase it, and they changed that. That's when they brought in the 50% of the traffic notices plus actual costs elsewhere. I can't remember the exact year, but we did have quite a few years ago have a report saying that it suddenly changed. So I think we are covering more than covering our costs now for that action.
Well, I might be out of date on it then.
Well, let's try and get some more exact information on the policy.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that.
To be distributed.
Yeah. Now, is there any kickback from the community of the $6 an hour fee now?
To my understanding, I haven't had any feedback regarding the $6 per hour. Majority of our parkers are staying for the 2 hours.
And then moving on, so it costing them nothing?
Yes.
Okay. What if I park at, say, 9 o'clock in the morning, and I put $6 in to the meter, I will get pinged, won't I, if I stay there till midday?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hang on, $6 an hour at 9 a.m, that's 3 hours they park.
Yeah.
Won't that
So-
cover their third hour?
But but the system won't allow me to do that, will it?
You have to come back and pay the $2.
Yeah.
Currently, if you're paying your dollars into the meter,
Yep.
the meter doesn't allow for you
That's
to
right.
delay it for 2 hours, and therefore that's where the parking wardens would have discretion in terms of the payment.
So I'd get an infringement, wouldn't I?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Thanks. Okay, we've had that. I'm proposing that's the end of the Access Hamilton report. I'm proposing we break for lunch, come back with, and we'll have a resolution worded when we come back, that we can deal with that at the end of the GM's report. I've got a list of things that need to be covered in the motion, but I haven't got the wording. I'm relying on the... Hey? I can't.
Amy's emailed it, we'd look at in lunch break.
No, I think that's... Yeah, so I'm suggesting 1:20. Does that sound all right to people? Yep. 1:20, yep. Thanks.
you.